The lengthy period of 2.5 millennia which separates the pre-pottery Neolithic B settlement from the Chalcolithic or Copper Age isn't easy to account for. According to Kenyon, the site was abandoned entirely by around 6000 BC, perhaps due to environmental degradation, coupled with overpopulation and poor weather conditions. There are tiny hints of similarly devastating conditions at other sites in the Fertile Crescent during this time, sparking fringe scholars to suggest that if there had been some kind of a genuine apocalyptic flood, half remembered in various later traditions, it may have been during this era that it happened. At Jericho, there may have been some form of continuation, but nothing as impressive as those that had come before. Nothing significant enough to leave a trace that we can find today. Perhaps people reverted back to a nomadic, pastoralist existence, as we know happened at other sites, gradually getting more food from their domesticated animals than anything else, and needing to travel to fairer pastures to get the best food for them. Perhaps, to a certain extent, this had happened even earlier, during the hiatus between the pre-pottery Neolithic settlements. Nevertheless, during this mysterious epoch of wandering tribes, huge changes began to occur, the adoption of pottery proving to be a huge societal bonus in increasing the population size of groups. Now, food could be kept safe from vermin and stored away for leaner times. Towards around 4000 BC, another huge improvement arrived too, perhaps initially brought south from Anatolia, as obsidian had been in previous generations. That technology was, of course, metallurgy, and soon it would change everything. During the Copper Age, often called the Chalcolithic, from around 4000 BC, Jericho seems to have become gradually occupied on a permanent basis once more. Though it remained a peripheral power, a material culture known as the Gasulium reigned over much of the region, but little evidence has been found at Jericho, despite one of their main settlements existing just a few kilometers away. This has led many scholars to surmise that Jericho wasn't settled again permanently on a significant basis until around 3000 BC. For the most part, in the vicinity of Jericho, this wasn't a time of cities or even large towns. Rather, it was an age of wanderers, small communities, and villages. Yet, as the third millennium dawned, with Uruk booming to the east, all that was to change, for the Bronze Age had begun. By around 3000 BC, though astonishingly little is known about it, Jericho was once more definitively occupied, this time by a regional power wielding a cutting-edge new technology: bronze working. This was a period of writing in Mesopotamia and Egypt, though apparently not yet in Palestine, although walled cities with solid defences and ramparts did become increasingly common. Jericho was no exception, and before long defensive ramparts were built, and presumably some sort of an army maintained. By around 2600 BC, Jericho's population had reached heights never before seen, and 200 years later, an impressive palace complex was built. There was nothing particularly remarkable about Bronze Age Jericho, which in truth had always been much better off when its neighbouring powers weren't as powerful, allowing it to flourish as an independent state. This, of course, wasn't always the case, and by around 2300 BC, city life collapsed, perhaps in part due to warlike neighbours, but no doubt the old enemy of environmental catastrophe also having a part to play. Until around 2000 BC, the people at Jericho may have lived a semi-nomadic lifestyle once again. Yet, soon enough, a second Bronze Age Jericho would arise, the greatest yet seen. Significant archaeological data exists for Middle Bronze Age Jericho, including a vast cemetery containing vertical shaft tombs and underground burial chambers, the elaborate funerary offerings contained within perhaps reflecting the emergence of local kings. The city itself was surrounded by an extensive defensive wall, complete with rectangular towers and ditches. It's likely that these fortifications, the same seemingly destroyed by around 1500 BC, are the ones talked of in the Bible, allegedly in connection with Joshua and the Israelites. Yet, nevertheless, all that grandeur was about to be overshadowed. Not from Mesopotamia, where the great city of Uruk, long since having dwindled in size, now finding itself overpowered by its descendants, but from another cradle of civilization, this one to the south and the west. By around 1900 BC, an epic tale was put to papyrus in Imperial Egypt, land of the pharaohs. Compared to Shakespeare by some, the tale of Sinew is widely considered one of the finest works of ancient Egyptian literature. Set during the 20th century BC, close to 4,000 years ago, Sinew is an Egyptian official who flees from the imperial court after overhearing a suspect conversation connected to the death of the king. Eventually getting back to Egypt as an old man after various travels and adventures amongst the warlike people of Canaan to the north. This is the land of Jericho, and the story provides us with one of our earliest glimpses into life here, outside of the archaeological record. Egyptians held contempt for foreigners at the best of times, and the tale of Sinew is no exception to this, complaining of wretched Asiatics inhabiting the Levantine coast and the hinterlands. Though thought to be mostly fiction, the tale belays the reality that Egypt had a huge amount of influence on the region. In time, this would become a stranglehold, one that wouldn't fully be broken for close to 1,000 years. In the centuries to follow, inscriptions all over the region talk of Egyptian victories and conquests, and in all likelihood, Jericho was either populated in part by Egyptian colonial administrators or by pro-Egyptian subject peoples, probably Canaanites. A hypothesis that is further evidenced by the Amarna letters and the lack of mention of Jericho in the Egyptian curse tablets, written to smite enemies during this time. It also remains possible that Amorites, the later founders of the city of Babylon and in part Assyria, ruled here for a time too, as well as the Hyksos, Hurrians and Mitanni, all powerful warlike people that held sway here for a time. Between around 1700 to 1550 BC, Jericho reached its greatest heights, having mostly lost its independence the city may have become prosperous by changing allegiances whenever necessary, thus playing off rival powers against one another and securing its survival. Jericho's rise also reflects the growth of a chariot-riding ruling class, perhaps brought into the region by contacts with Indo-Europeans in Anatolia, and greater levels of urbanization in the region in general. What goes up, however, must come down, and at some point, apparently in the 16th century BC, the city was destroyed, for a century or more no longer serving as an urban centre. However, the wall supposedly destroyed by the Israelite Joshua was disappointingly non-existent at the site when excavated by Kenyon. Though interestingly, in later excavations there does seem to have been slight marks of habitation until around 1400 BC, the date traditionally associated with the wars fought by the Israelite tribes, perhaps later half remembered and recorded in the Old Testament. Yet erosion and destruction from previous excavations inadvertently erased significant parts of this layer, meaning it's unlikely we'll ever know the truth. It didn't take long for Jericho to be reoccupied once more by practically every power to hold sway in the region over the next 3,500 years to come. Today, Jericho is still famous for its allegedly biblical walls, attracting thousands of tourists every year. Though in truth, the real wonder of the site is the Neolithic Tower. What others lie out there just waiting to be discovered, to give up their secrets of 12,000 years past?